other than this, ano pa yung dun sa ating mga basic sector, sino pa yung talagang tinutulungan ng NAPSI at ini-empower ng NAPSI para naman sila ay maging kabahagi ng lahat ng proyektong ginagawa ng NAPSI in coordination with other agencies? We mentioned about women a while back and other sectors, ma'am.
Yun nga po, so farmers, fisherfolk, indigenous people, urban poor, women, workers in the formal sector, and migrant workers, workers in the informal sector, victims of calamities, children, persons with disabilities, which is, by the way, my priority, and NGOs, cooperatives. Meron po kasing mga sektor na napakalakas at napakalalim ng NGO support. Okay? At international support. For example, children, may UNICEF, napakarami. I mean, helping children is very sexy. You know, everyone wants to help children. So it's, because I used to work for UNICEF, and it's so easy to make money for children. Then I worked in UNDP in New York, and it's impossible to make money for development because nobody cares about bridges. But you know, it's infrastructure. It doesn't move people. But if you see a child, gusto mong tulungan. So when it comes to actual fundraising, it becomes difficult. So UNICEF helps children, UNIFEM, UNFPA, UN Women, ang daming tumutulong sa mga kababaihan. Samantala, yung mga indigenous people po, they don't, and to answer the question of our friend from the Cordillera kanina, no one really represents them that much, which is why I am particularly anxious to represent them as much as possible, as well as persons with disabilities. That's people with physical and mental disabilities. Para po silang, wala na, hindi na sila binibigyan ng pansin. And there is a textual invisibility. You know, you don't really see them. And what I wanted to say is that Sec Joel Rocamora has asked me to write a book called Voices of the Poor. And the idea comes from the World Bank did a series called Voices of the Poor. Na meron pong Voices of the Poor of India, Voices of the Poor of Bangladesh, and so he was saying, well, maybe we can do a Voices of the Filipino Poor.
Yes.
So I'm really working right now on parang one chapter per sector. And what I'm doing is I'm gathering stories, human interest stories po, you know, like what people really experience on a day-to-day basis. And then I'm matching it with existing macroeconomic and demographic data. Kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng ibigay sa mga tao ang mga datos lang. Kasi naboboard sila at hindi naman nila na-absorb. Pero pag sinabi mo pong ganito ang nangyari kay Maria, no, since bata siya, ito ang mga naging mga pangarap niya. Tapos ito po ang nangyari at yun ang reason na dahil sa mga trahedya, hindi na niya nagampanan ng mga pangarap niya. You know, and then it becomes very moving. So, like for example, right now we're working on a story on female fisher folk. Because everybody talks about, when you think of a fisherman, you think of a man with a hat in a bangka who goes to the sea and he hauls the net.
Stereotyping.
That's our stereotype. But actually, you know, the data is very interesting because it's the women who count the fish, divide the fish, sell the fish. You know, and they do a huge amount of work with respect to fishing, and yet the income tends to go to the man. And so, syempre, ganito po, na they're not just householders, they are active in the labor sector, and yet when they go home, sila pa rin ang nagluluto, naglilinis, nagpapaligo ng bata. So it's an exhausting existence. And so that's an example of a story that we're working on. We actually have a number of very exciting stories, and I will be putting them out maybe in a few newspapers, little by little. The more we get the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
And aside from moving people with these stories, ano pa yung end in view natin dyan? Is it to get more support,
Yes.
legislative and otherwise?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that, of course, we're targeting donors and funders, international and national. And of course, we would like to have maximum support from the government, from DBM. And, it's not always easy to convince people to help the poor, and if even in the media, it's not necessarily news. If ginahasa na nga, sinaksak pa, binaon pa sa lupa, it's still not news if the person is poor a lot of times. So we are trying to get a lot more funding. And another thing that we're doing is meron po kaming localization strategy na we go to the municipalities and we see what are the needs in that area. Okay, so then my technical staff will go and say, in this area, they need X. And the World Bank has funding for this kind of need. Pero si Juan de la Cruz hindi marunong magsulat ng proposal sa World Bank. So, ikukwento lang niya sa amin ang mga pangangailangan niya, tapos yung technical staff ko magsusulat ng proposal, and we provide that for them. And the plan is for them to get funding directly.
And we get this through this localization.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Asec, kanina nabanggit nyo rin po na isa sa mga sector close to your heart ay yung mga persons with disabilities.
Yes.
Kumbaga yun nga, nakakaawa itong mga kababayan natin kung sila ay mahirap na pagkatapos sila yung mga persons with disabilities ba, kumbaga mas mabigat yung kondisyon na kinilalagyan nila sa kasalukuyan. Ano hong mga special projects na nasa drawing board ng NAPSI, specially intended para matulungan itong ating mga kababayan, mga persons with disabilities, ma'am?
Well, in my personal view, medications are very expensive in this country. And unfortunately, PhilHealth is good, but it provides yung tinatawag po nating catastrophic insurance. So, if you get hit by a car, in the road, it will help you.
Or if you get sick.
Yeah. It will pay for you. But in terms with people who have chronic illnesses and who have to pay for medication, so this is something we're studying because there has to be a percentage discounts for people with disabilities, and DSWD does provide. I mean, in this country, you actually can get a disability card, and you can say, I have X disability, so I'm entitled to a 20% discount on my medications. But a lot of persons with disability that I speak with, for them, 20%, it's really not enough. So we're thinking about affordable medications. And to address what you were saying kanina, one thing that we're also doing is we're looking at the examples of other countries, like who did what well where. Okay, like for example, India is very good with emergency employment. Mexico is very good with CCTs. India is also very good with cheap medications. So we're looking at examples like that. Now, another thing is that often, for example, we had a basic sector workshop recently, and one of the disabled people who came to the sectoral assembly, to the workshop, was complaining that hindi accessible sa wheelchair yung venue namin. So nahirapan po siyang pumasok sa CR at nagka-problema siya. And yun, pagkukulang po namin yun. And that's the kind of thing that, you take for granted, which really should be systematized and institutionalized, certainly in government. It's like every time that we meet with these people, we should be very, very sensitive to the kind of needs that they have. Now, the third point is with respect to mental disabilities. In my view, there's a major stigma in this country na, pinanganak kang may schizophrenia or something. We tend to judge them and stigmatize them and ostracize them. So my personal approach is to humanize them, by writing about them. Now, they're people, just like you and me, and they have stories and tragedies, and they have dreams and
Of course.
aspirations. So another tack would be to humanize them and make them palpable figures in the eyes of the public.
Napakagandang pakinggan, Alan, Asec, because hindi natin maintindihan talaga. We can never feel for these people who are in certain predicaments, no? So that when we hear about an agency and you're here to tell us, no, that something is being done about these things, na more often than not, they seem to be very little things na nakakalimutan nga because of the rush of life, But I was listening intently and oo nga, it makes sense. It makes sense na lahat yung effort natin, hindi lang yung, kaya ko ka rin kanina tinatanong yung sa CCT, no, yung gusto kong alisin yung notion na it's
Doled out.
yung dito na lang may CCT, may transfer naman, ganyan na lang. But more than that, it was explained very well by Asec Shahani na it is something that will enable you to be something and to do something, and later on kaya mo nang tumayo. Tapos yung para sa'yo, ibigay naman sa iba na nangangailangan din. Well, that's very nice to hear that NAPSI is on top of these things. And do we still have time? I think we do. But paano naman yung ating mga, anong tawag nito, yung party list representative? Na, pumasok lang sa isip ko na these same sectors are partly, if not entirely, represented then by the party list. Are you making efforts to get in touch, or dahil nasa kongreso sila, are they reaching out also to NAPSI and other agencies para ma-represent ng mabuti yung
Mga
itong
sektor
mga
nila.
concerns na ito, and the same sectors that NAPSI is taking care